My name is Steve Vigil. Currently unaffiliated. I'd say I'm kind of, as my buddies say, have gun will travel. I help out with different organizations and activities in a variety of kind of social justice areas. I was raised here in the U.S. My family's from Colorado. On both sides, my dad's side is old school Manito, Chicano, or Mexican American from southern Colorado, and my mother's side on my mother's side I have my grandmother's family came from Sicily, and they ended up moving to the same part of southern Colorado and working in some of the same mines as my dad's side, so coal miners. I just think it's extremely important at this moment that we really kind of change the narrative around immigrants. It's been I in my own family, I've seen we've got immigrants on both sides, and we've got people who are considered native-born as well. But it was interesting the difference between on my mother's side, her father who was of English descent, and my dad's side, his family who's of Hispano Latino descent, who's actually been in what's this country much longer, since the 1600s, and even longer than that if you consider Spanish and Native American and just everyone that made up the community that is now New Mexico and Colorado. We've been there a long time, but when people look at that, my ancestry, it's always, your mother's side is the one that's been here, and your father's side are immigrants, and so to me it's interesting that even taking into account that in the southwestern United States, this is the part of the country that has had the longest history of European settlement, and also the interaction between, not always the positive interaction between the Spanish and Native American and African as well. And then in the UN, I've worked in countries where many of the people that are coming to this, that are seeking refuge in the world right now, are coming from countries I've worked in, and in my position, I've been in places, and I've seen firsthand why many of these refugees are coming, and trying not to get emotional about it. But people do not leave their homes unless there's a very good reason. And at this time, immigrants and refugees, the way we're treating them, we've lost our humanity. And to me, it's important that we as a society and as a country that was based on immigration, that we look back and we recognize why it is our different ancestors came here, what it was that was behind them leaving and taking that long road and giving up what they had and leaving families and loved ones behind to come here to make a better life for their future. There was an understanding that there was going to be a change in how immigration policy was going to happen under the current administration, and that was put forward through the foresight of the different organizations here in San Diego coming together. Through my network and friends of mine, actually mutual friends of ours, I was contacted because they knew of my background working in humanitarian situations elsewhere. And let me be quite frank. I mean, what we were experiencing at the border, and especially what we saw in those initial stages in October, November, through December, this is a humanitarian crisis. The people that were coming, I've worked in Central America before on the issues around the Central American diaspora, unaccompanied minors. I was involved in advocacy efforts around a gang truce in El Salvador that was an attempt to bring some peace to that country a few years back. So I've been there. I've seen the conditions these people are coming from. And at this time, the people that are coming from Central America, they are the poorest of the poor. They are some of the most marginalized people. When we talk about Guatemala, the majority of them are coming from indigenous communities, many of them with limited Spanish. There are people that have a history of being marginalized and and oppressed, and often violently oppressed by their governments. When we look at Honduras, I think the situation is the same. Similarly, I think many of these people are coming from communities that are heavily indigenous, although they might not say that based on the history of Honduras and how governments there have treated indigenous people. And in the case of El Salvador, I mean, it's a similar situation. I think you're looking at countries that have had endemic poverty, some of the highest rates of inequality in the world, that have highest rates of homicide. And another thing is one of the highest rates of femicide in the world, which is something people don't talk about. If you're a poor indigenous person in Guatemala, or a poor rural farmer in the hillsides, in the mountains of Honduras, and you're seeing that those who are standing up for your rights are being eliminated, and people are pushing in. You've got gangs, you've got, everyone blames the gangs, but you also have narco traffickers. You've got local governments working with corporations to displace people from prime land. There's not a lot of people advocating for these folks down there, and many of them are seeing that they don't have the choices, and I think they're making choices, very difficult choices to leave, and oftentimes they're leaving at the spur of a moment. And I think, especially when they've got children, and especially when they've got daughters. Growing up in my hometown in Colorado, you had, amongst the Latinos, you kind of had a split between the Chicano, Mexican American, those of us that are born and raised here, whose families are from here, kind of old school, manitos, as we say, from those of us from New Mexico and southern Colorado. And then the Mexican immigrants. And I, as a young kid, my brother and I grew close to many of the immigrant kids. We played soccer and all that. My mother was a Head Start teacher. She knew all the families. And, a couple families grew really close, and one of them became, one individual actually became my older brother. His family came from Zacatecas, Mexico. And I saw firsthand a lot of the struggles that he had and his family had. And that's really influenced me when I look at people coming. I know it takes a lot for people to come here, and the struggle is very difficult, but I also know they're coming here for all the right reasons, the same reasons that we're all here.